short haircut on the sides, same as you now, but it just stopped working. You start looking like as if it wasn't right.
I saw a guy on the train. I've been in Edinburgh today, and I saw a guy on the train, and I saw his haircut, and it was a 0 up about halfway up, and then a number 1. And I was looking at it and going, I'm pretty sure you're older than me, and that looks a bit silly, actually.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, man, but there's something that happens to your face at like 35, 40 or something, and it just stops you from wearing certain things and using certain haircuts. So I'm actually desperately disappointed with my haircut right now, because I took a risk. I said I'd take the haircut before I went on a break, and now I think it's like a mess, and it's like, oh my goodness, I have to walk around looking like this for the next 2 weeks. But anyway, have you had a good week? Well, you look smart. Have you been doing interesting stuff, or what?
I have. I've been presenting at KPMG in Edinburgh at their some sort of global tech pioneers initiative that they have.
Oh, very interesting. Sounds something like it's confidential, so I won't ask too much on that.
No, it's not confidential at all. It's an event that we were invited to come and present at. And
really,
I don't know why. I just felt, because I'm going into an accountancy firm, that I would
look like an accountant.
No, I've not. I've got jeans on and stuff, but
right.
I did put a blazer on.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. Anyway, we are live. We are live with episode 42 of Brainfood Live on Air, season 2. This is actually the second episode of the year, so excited for us to bring this show to everyone who's listening. Very excited today as well, because we've got an amazing guest to talk about his product, his vision, his journey, his sense of community around the industry. And it's going to be fascinating having a chat with him. And he, of course, is the boss of our sponsors today. So episode 42 is sponsored by our buddies at SmartRecruiters, fantastic ATS, great product for companies that are looking to go from SMB to enterprise. Definitely one of the up-and-coming products that are out there for companies that are looking to really put efficiencies into their system. And they actually wanted me to promote their event, Hiring Success, in San Francisco in February. So I'll be there. I'll be doing a double fireside chat with my friend Lars Schmitz. I don't know how that's going to work, but we're going to interview each other on the couch, I think. 30 minutes him interviewing me, and then 30 minutes me interviewing him. So it should be quite an exciting kind of experiment. But for everyone who's in San Francisco, who's wanting to go to San Francisco, please do ping me a message in chat, because I might be able to get you a ticket that is significantly better than market rate. So anyway, someone share the Hiring Success link into the chat stream, and we'll get on with that a bit later. All right. Anyway, I'm joined as ever by my co-host and formerly chief promoter, now a bit lackadaisical in his chief promoting, but it's Adam Gordon. Adam Gordon, how are you doing? How was your week?
Yeah, that's remarkable how quick you can go from being like hero to
zero, man.
Hero to zero, because I've been chief promoter until I didn't post an update on LinkedIn this week summarizing the Brainfood. 1 week. And you noticed straight away.
Dude, I mean, I tell you what, it has an impact. The no Adam Gordon means no Glaswegians sign up. When no Glaswegians sign up, I get very disappointed. So
I can tell you precisely why it was as well. It was because every Sunday morning I'm on the cross trainer, and for 60 minutes. And the first thing I do is I get Brainfood out, and I just get my phone out, and I'm on the cross trainer, just go, oh, that's cool. And then I share a bit of it on LinkedIn, and then I post it. And before the end of the day, I've got my highest number of likes on LinkedIn for the entire week every time I share one of your Brainfood posts. But this week on Sunday, I was doing something different. That's the only reason.
You failed to exercise. Yeah, that's basically it. Yes. Now that I know, basically, if you don't do the promo, it's because you're failing to exercise. So there's another reason why I need to get in your case. Anyway, I hope you at least read it. In which case, yes. So what was interesting for you from recruiting Brainfood last week, man? Let's run through this real quick.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna go right to the bottom, which is quite unusual, and I think it was in like other things you need to know about. It was how a family spent their universal basic income. So this is your hero, Andrew Yang.
Andrew Yang.
Yang Gang 2020.
That's the man. Absolutely.
Let's just talk about universal basic income for a second. Tell us your opinion.
Well, I mean, I've been a convert of it. I was a critic like everyone else. Like, I was like, well, what the hell's all this about? You know, you're going to give everyone money. How does that all work? But then we have this guy called Andrew Yang, who's a competitor for the Democratic nomination for the presidency in 2020. Completely out of nowhere, literally no political background, no backing, no nothing, and he's still in with a shout. He's like one of the top 5 candidates in there. But he tells a really compelling story as to why UBI may be very, very important. And he's got people like Elon Musk backing him. He's got like deep thinkers that are looking at it and thinking, you know what, you're not going to cross-train a bunch of truck drivers into software coders and expect that they're going to suddenly be useful and interested in doing that type of work. We really need to look seriously about how we deal with people whose jobs and identities are so tied together that they may not be willing or interested or able to get into those types of work. And what Yang's on about is basically saying we need to rethink what work is and really decouple the income side of it from the work that we do. So his UBI is massively radical. I'm supporting it even though I'm not a US citizen, simply because I think if the US does do it, I think that will force most Western economies to follow. And that will be globally significant if that happens. So obviously he's the longest, the long shot. He's got like 0.01% of ever getting there. But I do think his proposal is super compelling. And I also think if he's in a one-to-one with Trump, that $1,000 a month, every month for the rest of your life has to be a very compelling vote winner, no matter what your sort of political alignment is. He could just redraw the map with that one policy. So I think you look at the other Democrats that are in there, I really don't see a contender that might beat Donald Trump and maybe Bernie Sanders.
Bloomberg could outbuy him.
Could outbuy him, maybe.
Outspend him.
Maybe. I mean, there's characters with a lot of qualities and so forth, but ultimately, in order to defeat Trump, you have to win over people who voted for Trump or were so disaffected by the recruitment, the interview process that they didn't vote for anybody at all. And I think a complete wild card like this guy might do it. But anyway, he is the only guy also talking Brainfood language. He's talking AI. He's talking tech unemployment. He's talking workforce automation. None of the other candidates have got a clue. No. So I'm really interested in what he's got to say because he's a political leader. I think we kind of need, if not this year, then at some point we need this type of generation in there. Yeah.
Good. Okay. I knew you'd have something to talk about with that one. Next one, bringing the tone down slightly, is I'll keep it up quite high level tone. So my friends at RL100 have created their TA maturity model. It's really quite comprehensive. I'd encourage everybody to go and look at it. It breaks it down into 3 different main aspects of talent acquisition, being process, people, and then data and technology. And it talks about it's for planning, engaging, sourcing, onboarding, splits it up like that, and it explains what you're doing if you're basic, what you're doing if you're intermediate, what you're doing if you're mature. So you can go and benchmark. Am I doing things like according to best class?
You know what? That was a really good model. And for people who don't know RL100, that's basically a recruitment leaders 100. I think it's UK only for now, but it's a really good idea that our friend Jamie Leonard's put together.
Australia as well.
Australia's got a version. I think why not US? Everyone should have a version of this. But they put together a maturity model, which I think is a very useful template. It did get some criticism, it had to be said, because some of the language looked a bit woolly in places and it maybe not as granular as other people might have preferred. But nonetheless, I looked at it and thought, you know what, that's number one. It's interesting to see where you might plot your team on that graph. So you can see for yourself what the skills needs might be. And secondly, if you're not happy with the language used, you can adapt the model. I mean, that's the idea of models. It's there to provide a framework for you to use. So I think it's a very interesting thing. I've just dropped it on the link on Dropbox there, so anybody can download that. I think Jamie's fine for that to go public. If he isn't, it's kind of too late. But it's there, so check it out. Okay, what else, Adam?
I am utterly astonished at the highest paying companies of 2019 for software engineers. I think this is I think this must be in the USA.
USA only, yeah.
Right. Okay. So if you're an entry level software engineer, apparently in Silicon Valley, you can earn $234,000, which is about £160,000 at Lyft.
Yeah.
The big sort of Uber competitor in the USA. Stripe, it's a fintech, isn't it? $220,000. So that's £140,000, £150,000.
Yeah.
Unless you don't have the right brain to do it, to be a software engineer, almost everybody should go and do it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, the prices are massive, the salaries are huge, and this is by a company called Levels, FYI, by the way, a small company out of Seattle, but they do some amazing work in terms of just grabbing. Somehow they've managed to persuade developers to cough up their contracts and basically be able to benchmark across the industry what the pay is per level. So why it's called Levels is because most tech companies have a leveling kind of approach to it, and you get paid in that way. So yeah, the numbers are ridiculous. I don't need to be told that. One of my good friends is actually a senior guy in one of these big tech companies, and he was embarrassed. Last time I saw him, he was embarrassed to tell me what his salary was. He was embarrassed. I recruited him.
Why did he tell you if he was that embarrassed?
I insisted.
Doesn't sound embarrassed to me.
No, I insisted because I remember recruiting him in the UK for like 45K. And that was in 2013 or whatever. He's now on, well, I'll tell you, 600 grand. In 7 years, right? Yeah. Ridiculous. Anyway, really interesting on the salary side because it means that if you're competing for this type of talent in the West Coast, you're going to have to be putting those types of numbers together, or as we are seeing, you're going to have to put the dev team elsewhere, which is why we are seeing second-tier cities, so-called second-tier cities in the US starting to grow their tech ecosystems because it's untenable to put a team out there. And I think a lot of people are saying, look, this is more or less peak Silicon Valley. It can't go any higher than this. It's just got to start trending down fast because there's no way you can outcompete these big guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One other thing that I found quite interesting was the locations. So, of course, Silicon Valley was top, but Seattle was number 2 ahead of New York, which I was quite surprised about. I would have thought New York would have been number 2, but Seattle's higher.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, the big tech up in Seattle that does that. I mean, New York's basically got banks, it's got advertising, it's got fintech, but it doesn't have those rapid growth startups really.
Yeah, Amazon and Microsoft
Yeah, exactly. So it's a different ecosystem, and the US ecosystem really needs to be broken down in per city type of manner, because you can't casually talk about the US as a single entity, I think, when it comes to economics.
No, agreed.
Anyway, what else, man, before we bring Jerome on?
Okay, one more guess then. So the 100 best places we're talking about the 100 highest paid. Let's talk about an entirely different thing. 100 best workplaces for diversity. I thought that was pretty interesting. An entirely different type of list, of course, to the 100 highest paid software engineers.
You know what? So it would be good to compare the two, because probably you'd have a completely different top 100 there.
The top 10 is there is no overlap in the top 10.
No overlap.
I looked at that specifically.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think I forget which company did this, but I like that website because was it Fortune? Yeah, brilliant. The reason why I like that is because of its. It had a very good interface and it allowed you to do filtering, so you could figure out a little bit more than just presenting a huge list to people. US centric, of course, but still definitely worth having a look at that. And seeing, there could be case studies for you to follow up if diversity is an important thing for you to think about.
So I know that people in recruitment say there's nothing at all good about Workday, but I can tell you one good thing about Workday. It came number 7 on the best places to work for, most diverse workplaces.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's two things: there's product and there's company, isn't it? And those two things are different concepts and different brands, really. So, worth having a chew on that. Okay, cool. Anyway, let's get Jerome on because he's basically had to get up early in order to do this call with us. I'm very pleased that I'm not pleased that I've forced him to do that, but I'm pleased that he's volunteered to do it.
A tech industry titan like him, this is not early. This is 8 o'clock.
I know.
He's been up since 4:30. He's been working out and doing yoga.
I'm flattering him, but I see Jerome here now. I think let me just invite him on, and we'll see see if we can get him on the show. Yeah,
he got up and started. He's in San Francisco. He got up and started. He got up with yoga, then did a 15-mile hike, and then started meditating. And then started working at 5:30.
That is the Silicon Valley way, right? I mean, you can go that way completely. And there he is.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. How are you, Jerome? Great to see you, sir.
Good morning.
Oh,
wow,
we've got a
big echo.
Big echo from Jerome there. That's okay. How are you doing, Jerome? How is the morning for you so far?
My morning's going great, and I've even lost my echo, which is perfect.
Yeah. Perfect. Now, before we get into it, Jerome, can we just confirm that you did not go on a 20-mile run before this call, and in fact, you just crawled out of bed like a normal person?
You know what? I was just about to bite my toast here with my breakfast when you said, "Let's bring Jerome on," and so I was like.
We might have seen him in action on that one point, but feel free to chow down, Jerome. Let me not stop you from doing that. But firstly, welcome to Brainfood Live on Air. Great to have you on. I don't know whether you remember, Jerome, but you and I actually shared a video interview about 10 years ago. Really at the start of SmartRecruiters, and I remember you were saying, "Oh, we've got 4 people in the room. I'm about to hire my 5th guy or something." And I was thinking, "All right, great. This is really interesting to hear you say what you're saying." And even back then, you were very values driven. I remember at that time, you were very keen to bake that into your product. And now, kind of, we're coming back to where you are now, which is multi-million turnover organization. I saw you hire a new CTO recently, bring on a whole bunch of new people into the team. So things seem to be going really great. Great to see momentum coming out of your business, man.
Yeah, thank you, Hung. And it's great to see you haven't changed.
Well, the hair's got a lot grayer, and there's gray appearing everywhere now. So there's no denying the onset of time. But anyway, Jerome, the reason why we wanted to speak to you is because there was this idea that actually your event introduced me to, I have to say, which was this idea that, people in recruitment, talent acquisition, HR, we have a special responsibility due to the function that we have to do things for society, because we are the gatekeepers of economic opportunity, and without opening the door, we can actually significantly change people's lives, particularly underprivileged and marginalized groups. So that was true to me when I first heard it. I just wondered what was the origin for that, Jerome? How did you come to the realization? I needed you to tell me that. So how did you come to that realization for yourself?
I think I actually came to it fairly early on, because I started my career as a headhunter in Prague at the time. So this is going to date me a bit, but this is 1992, just post-Berlin Wall goes away, the economic transition. And all these big companies are moving into Eastern Europe, and they want a marketeer with 5 years experience, an accountant with 10 years experience, or this or that. And there's no such talent in the market because, of course, they just transitioned from a communist economy into the free economy. And at that point in time, I realized that actually recruiters are meant to identify people and give them the opportunity. And sometimes you find the perfect profile, sometimes you don't. And actually being able to identify what is good in a person and what could they do, what's a person's potential and what could they be good at. And I think that experience has given me really a unique perspective, because I wasn't going off the list like who's graduated from Harvard and worked at Facebook, right? I was going off the list like who speaks English or some English and has what would seem like a good marketing personality or a good accounting personality or would actually be great as a leader. And so really looking at raw talents to be trained into those organizations. And from then on, it's just been a good journey of realizing how much recruiters can and should contribute.
That's fascinating, Jerome. I knew you worked in Prague, but I didn't connect it with the collapse of communism. And the fact that if you're recruiting in Eastern Europe at the time, literally there were no candidates with the credentials that would be fitting these jobs suddenly. Yeah. There was like completely new set of roles for that country or that economy that you would not have previous experience in. You had to go with potential. So that is absolutely fascinating. There's actually a HBR report that I'm going to put into Brainfood next week, which talked about, I think they surveyed companies that declared themselves as having reasonable success in attracting digital talent for their companies. And then number one sort of reason why they said that was the case is because they hired for potential rather than credentialism. And that was the key for them to actually become able to hire this type of digital talent.
Yeah, I think a very simple trick for recruiters out there and hiring managers to actually embrace this is focus your candidate assessment not on must-haves, but on must-achieves. As simple as that. Must have 5 years experience, degree, blah, 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 blah. Must achieve, write excellent code, be a good team lead, da, 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 right? And so if you really focus your evaluation, your scorecard, as you interview candidates on must achieves, like as if you were doing a performance review of the person prior to them joining, basically, if you actually apply that, then your mind opens up to a lot more diverse candidate. And that applies to diversity in background, but also diversity in all sorts of criteria.
Yeah, I think if you look at it's a shift from historical focus to future focus, isn't it? If you're looking purely on background, that is backward looking. You know, you're literally saying, you know, I'm purely looking into the history with no projection for the future in terms of what it is that you want to do. So it's about understanding what the job is, having deep understanding of the job that you want performed, and then what good performance looks like when you go ahead and do that.
Yeah, very clearly.
So moving on to sort of where you're at now, you're running Smart Recruiters. It's obviously flying as a business. Hiring success, like this event, which occurred, I think 3 years ago, something like that. It wasn't so long that it was a first idea. Can you explain a little bit about why that's become an important part of your thinking and in the calendar for the business?
Yeah. I mean, hiring success is first and foremost a methodology to achieve hiring success. The ability to hire amazing talent on demand, which is what every CEO in the world would love, right? That's why they put hiring top talent as their number one priority. Then they give it to HR and they underfund it. They push it into the traditional staffing model where faster and cheaper actually rules, right? Cost per hire, time to fill, faster, cheaper. What we're saying is actually no. If you want to compete in today's world, you need to invest in recruiting to acquire the best talent, just like you invest in marketing to acquire candidates. And that's not called staffing. It's not called recruiting. It's not called whatever. It's called hiring success. It's the ability to hire amazing talent at scale. And I think that is what the industry is witnessing right now, that recruiting teams are reinventing themselves from a applicant tracking, processing, faster automation to a proper sales and marketing function where you acquire, select, and onboard amazing talent. And so as we were digging deeper into this methodology, what this means, obviously we build the software to do that, right? To be your ATS and CRM and blah, blah. But we actually saw that there's a whole industry here. There's so many talent acquisition leaders out there that want to be more of a business partner to the business, that want to actually be able to step to the CEO and say, oh, you want to hire amazing talent? Yeah, sure. And then give them the recipe how to do that. And we felt that deserves a proper event. And that's when we started Hiring Success. We had the first one 4 years ago in San Francisco. It was a smallish event, about 200 to 300 people. And we're now into two main events, US, Europe. Our US event is on February 11 and 12 in San Francisco, so it's in 4 weeks. And we'll have over 1,000 talent acquisition leaders there, really, and you'll be there, Hung, I know, and really talking about the future of recruiting. What is recruiting, once you put it in a lens of hiring success, what does recruiting actually look like? And I think we have really a fantastic opportunity as recruiters, as TA leaders, to reinvent ourselves and to enter the boardroom through the main door.
You know what? That's it's inspiring to hear you say that, because you were one of the first people that I think understood that the ATS, the acronym ATS, was becoming redundant, because all it was doing was perceiving human beings as applicants through a pipeline. And now we're getting into it, right? We're getting into this idea that, you can't force especially highly skilled, in-demand people through a funnel. They would resist that experience. You need to have a totally different attitude to it. You need to work with them at their pace, their agenda. They need to have stake and control in the journey that you take together. I'll be interested to know what kind of tooling you're building around that, because at the end of the day, companies, when they are looking at buying software, they probably are still thinking ATS. So what are you doing to service that need? And then how do you build on top of that to kind of edge them towards this newer way of thinking about candidates?
Yeah, the ATS, I'm smiling, right? Because as you know, I plead guilty. I designed one of the first ATS, a company called Mr. Ted, now Luma, it's now Saba. And what we really did at the time, we automated the file cabinet. Like, think about the context, right? Late 90s, the internet comes. What does the recruitment department look like in the late 90s? It's just a giant stack of paper, resumes coming through the door. And so customers were like, can you please put this online and automate, right? And this is what applicant tracking systems were designed to do. That there's no surprise that Teleo became the leader of that market. The founder of Teleo, Louis Tetou, came from BAN, supply chain automation, right? That's exactly the same principles that have been applied. And when you think about it, like ATS, applicant tracking system, even the name is wrong, right? It doesn't say hire amazing people system, right? It's just applicant tracking system. So when I, after a 10-year kind of run at ATS and selling ATSs to large organizations, I said, like, okay, it's a successful software company, but gee, we haven't solved the problem. Like, we have not made hiring easy. That's what actually compelled me to move to San Francisco and to start SmartRecruiters. And SmartRecruiters really is the generational successor to the applicant tracking system. And we designed it on 3 core principal fundamentals that we were like literally from a blank sheet of paper and say, all right, in an ideal world, what should an enterprise use to hire amazing talent? And we landed on 3 things, which was 1, the system needs to help me attract amazing talent. Once you say that, you're like, oh, okay, so this is a whole lot of marketing capabilities. This goes into candidate experience, this goes into my website, this goes into job advertising, into referrals, into internal mobility, into CRM, into nurturing, into direct sourcing. Like, this needs to be a candidate attraction machine. So we invested heavily in that part so you can actually attract good candidates and apply proper marketing strategies, segment your talent, and not start calling on LinkedIn for dozens of software developers, because that doesn't work. This is better managed with a proper marketing campaign where you actually get people in, nurture them. Well, there's many things we could talk about. Like, once you approach candidate attraction as a marketing problem, you segment your talent, you apply the best channels, you measure what works, and then you just implement it. If you ask, please design a candidate attraction strategy to a CMO, they actually would do this in their sleep. It's actually not really difficult. The problem is we as recruiters haven't had the tools. We haven't been trained to do that. That was one. Let's make sure we have that. Second, we said we got to fix the relationship with hiring manager. Like, there's no way you can be successful if the hiring managers don't use the system. They sit back with their head like this. Like, you better find a candidate, right? That never works. So we said hiring manager engagement and collaboration is at the heart of it. So we designed a system that literally is super easy to use. We're getting raving reviews from hiring managers who are like, finally, a system to manage what is actually one of the most important parts of my life, which is hiring people on my team. So the hiring managers being part of that collaboration, working in hiring teams, and being able to work in an intuitive way really helped. We brought in scorecards. We make the selection process more professional around must-achieves, more transparent, less biased. There's a lot of things that go there. And then third pillar is obviously about recruiters and recruiter productivity. And recruiters nowadays they have a hard job, right? Their market has changed. It has never been harder to find good talent. The jobs are more and more skilled and more granular. The perfect match is super hard. There's a high demand. God, it's hard. And they don't have the technology to do it, right? So they wake up in LinkedIn, they continue in some ATS, they have their spreadsheet for their boss on Friday, and then their email at the end of the day. So we said, let's make sure that recruiters have all of their data, processes, and suppliers in one platform that can be their system of record and help them be just productive and in control and compliant, by the way, because if you think about GDPR and other things, GDPR particularly, if your recruiting activity happens outside the system, you're not compliant because you're not controlling the private data that's being stored about individuals. So bring everything in one platform. So those were the three core pillars of a hiring success platform and the suite that we built at SmartRecruiters: candidate experience, manager engagement, recruiter productivity. And it took us 4 years. 4 years fully funded with VC funding. Back to your conversation about the cost of engineers. 40 engineers, 4 years, almost 200 man-years of work. And we launched the platform in 2015. We've had so far about 1,000 enterprise customers that have switched from an old school ATS assembled with a CRM, with this, with that, and like kind of a Frankenstein architecture to a proper talent acquisition suite, which they plug on top of their HRIS, being Workday, SAP, Oracle, and that actually helps them attract, select, and hire amazing talent.
That's a great story, Jerome. And it's great to always see your enthusiasm when you're talking about product and product development.
I was going to say, don't ask me this kind of question, man, because I could hijack the whole show.
Yeah, you can keep going. But I tell you, you hit on important things like the hiring manager, getting them on board. That's always been a critical problem when it comes down to not only tooling, but the business relationship we have internally. Recruiter productivity is totally associated with this. And we're all aligned, I think, in terms of the need to have a more sophisticated marketing mindset when we're coming to attract candidates. So super interesting on that. I want to bring it back to sort of how we think about the social good aspect, Jerome. One of the remarkable things about the event series that you've launched is that there is a very clear social responsibility theme. And I just wanted to say, okay, how did it become prominent? Because as you mentioned, it's something you've always thought about since back in the day in Prague. But why did it kind of come to the surface so it's so prominent now in the event? Because that's, I think, one of the main differences between the hiring success event and the other ones that I've been to is this constant drumbeat of, hey, listen, we need to actually do social things. We have power and we need to use that power responsibly to help people.
Yeah, we do have a lot of power. And it really resonated for me, honestly, after 10 years of selling and implementing ATS. It became clear that what we were doing was wrong for companies, but wrong for candidates. We made the job search less personal, less human, more automated, more complex, more frustrating, and without bringing a better outcome for the customer, right? could say, okay, it's great for the customer, too bad it sucks for the candidate, but there it actually doesn't work for either party. So when I started SmartRecruiters, it's really, I took a candidate angle. I'll be honest here, my Series A pitch to Mayfield, which is a local venture fund here, said, I want to eradicate unemployment. I think there's too much friction on the recruitment market, on the employment market. I think matching people to job at scale is a technology problem that can and should be solved, and I want to be the one that solves it. As simple as that. And that's where their initial investment came from, and that's what we've been busy building. So I've really taken a strong candidate angle here. And I think as recruiters, our responsibility is massive. I mean, you were in the room in Amsterdam, I think, on my closing talk at the Hiring Success Conference in September. We had about 400 TA leaders in the room. And when I looked at the crowd and I said, well, 400 TA leaders, mostly large enterprises, like many very large companies were in the room. But how many people do you guys hire here? I reckon probably 1 million, right? About 2,500 average per person in the room. That's 1 million hires. 1 million hires, right? Now, who you hire not only defines who you are as a company, but it actually also defines what is the world you want to live in. Who you hire defines the world you want to live in. You want to live in a diverse world? Well, hire diverse. You want to live in a world where things are stratified, there's no upward movement, then don't, right? Then filter by must-haves rather than must-achieve. Then don't open up. And I think here it's the level of responsibility we have in educating hiring managers, in forcing ourselves is really massive. And I strongly believe in that. And I'm telling you this from an angle of I want to do good, but actually I'm just an entrepreneur here. I want my customers to be successful. Diverse team perform a lot better than non-diverse team every time around. So that's actually for companies the right thing to do and the right thing to do for their business.
Let me ask a question. Sorry, Adam, I'm dominating the chat here, but I'm so interested.
Sorry, let me just add one thing. I've got about 30 questions for Jerome, but I just wanted to say that'll be one thing that you agree with Workday about, I guess. Might be the only thing.
In what way?
Well, they've got they were on that list of 100 most diverse best companies for diversity in the US.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think more and more modern, successful companies are being built along those lines. And we often talk about diversity in the likes of Google and Facebook and so on. Actually, they're the only one that communicate their numbers. So yeah, everybody's like, whoa, they're not good enough. Yeah, okay. Have we looked at the others? Because the others are not even speaking about it, right? So at least they're talking about it and they're doing something about it and they're admitting they want to get better. And I think they're leading the charge. And Workday is one of them. Salesforce is another one. That there's a lot of diversity being driven out of the tech organizations.
Yeah. I think Uber published theirs a couple of weeks ago, and I promoted it into the newsletter because obviously Uber also one of those brands that has attracted a lot of negative PR over the last 12 months or so. But I just thought, you know what, at least they're literally putting their head above the parapet and saying, okay, here are diversity stats, and you think, okay, Uber might get hammered on this, but how many companies don't even do that? So I think credit needs to go where credit's due, and I think when companies step forward in this way, it just forces other people to do the same. It's very difficult to be a competitor with Uber, to be Lyft, let's say, sitting there, and they do their diversity sort of report. How can I not do mine? So I think over time, we'll start being very, very transparent about all of this. And that in itself will cause some pressure to move in that direction.
Yeah.
A question for you, though. Sorry, one question with Jerome here. So you're talking about, yes, all these hiring managers, you should think about diversity, you should do this, this, and this. But is it, at what level is it the responsibility of the recruiter, Jerome? Because you have leaders of the department, let's say, which you can say, of course, they're the ones in charge. Is it also the responsibility of the operator, who's literally a recruiter in a massive team? Where is how do you distribute the responsibility for doing social good when you've got a guy who basically might be struggling, hitting the requirements, hitting the targets, and so forth? How would you have that conversation with that person?
I think there's so it's definitely your responsibility, whoever you are. I don't care. You might be an interviewer, you might be the hiring managers, you might be the boss of the department, the coordinator, the recruiter, the TA leader, the CEO, whoever you are, it's your responsibility. Do not look at others to solve that problem, because it is your responsibility. If you're a recruiter, there's many things you can do. First, you can start by having a more diverse sourcing strategy. So how do you go out and actually actively network in pockets of areas where minorities can be found, underrepresented group can be found? It's not hard. It's actually enjoyable. You get to meet different people. Diversity sourcing. So for sure. Second, remove the bias in screening, right? Just your name reduces your chances of being interviewed by factor 3. Well, that's a shame, right? Shouldn't be that. And you are in charge of screening. So whether you use AI to actually score and give you a recommendation that's independent of diversity information, perfect. Or if not, just make sure you don't. And then these are the people you pass through. And so make sure that you do actually pass through a diverse pool of candidates. When I say diverse pool of candidates, do not give me the one white person among one white male among 3 black women, because actually the white male has no chance of being hired if that's the case. You can invert the example if you prefer, but you need a proper diverse, like having one diverse candidate in a shortlist is the most stupid way to do it, because it actually doesn't work. There's actually a very interesting study from Harvard on this, that if you put 2 men and a woman in an interview, a man gets hired. If you put 2 women and a man in an interview, actually a woman gets hired. So the majority on your shortlist actually statistically gets hired, right? So
I would love to see that report. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
Intuitively, yeah.
And so having one diverse candidate is totally counterproductive. Better have 0, right? So have a properly balanced shortlist. And then last but not least, do force on your business a objective criteria-based selection process. Like the idea that the candidate goes to see the manager, they have a chat, and then you get feedback at the coffee machine saying, yeah, I like him, we both play golf, it's going to be cool, let's hire him. That is not a recruitment process, right? You need to have proper scorecard on each job, and at least 2 interviewers, maybe 3, that are actually evaluating people on objective criteria, the must-achieves, as I said, and they do so transparently. The moment you do that, what happens? 1, you're making the right decision because you're objectively assessing candidates against your need. And second, discrimination or bias goes away, because bias is human. I mean, I am biased, you are biased, right? We both work in the recruitment industry. We have lots to talk about. I like you, Hans, right? If you were working in the cell phone industry, maybe we wouldn't connect because I have nothing to talk to you about. Right? So if you come to an interview, even if it has nothing to do with recruiting, I'll be like, well, this is a cool guy, right? We are biased. This is who we are. We connect with other human beings. And so to remove bias, just replace human opinions by proper objective criteria selected by a panel. Make this transparent with a clear rating, and you remove bias, right? And it's for good reasons that many of our customers actually, Visa, Square, and others are actually implementing selection panel where the person who makes the hiring decision has not met the candidate. And just look at the report on this one. This is apparently the best one. Let's hire this person, right? So there's a lot you can do at the recruiter level, working with your hiring manager from sourcing to screening to actually enforcing the right selection process, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I pick out the way I like talking to you, Jerome, is because you come out with bullet points, which basically makes it very easy to remember what you said. So number 1, diversify the source. The recruiter has a responsibility. You don't need to have a big strategic conversation with anybody. Just go and look in different places. And you are the one generating the pipeline. So you have that kind of early, you can see the diversity in the pipeline if you wanted to. The second thing that you have to do is that you need to basically get the hiring managers to scorecard their responses. They can't get away with saying, hey, listen, he or she was not strong enough. I remember back in the day, they would use the strength as a measurement of whether. So, and I was thinking, what do you mean strength? Strong? I mean what? Are we lifting dumbbells here in this job? You know. So and then. So it kind of removes this kind of feeling that, because I'm just thinking, if you're a young recruiter, you might just be feeling, oh, I need to have a really tough conversation with the CEO about how cool diversity is, and I don't know how to do that. But there's actually some practical things that you could implement without necessarily referencing that senior person. You're just doing it professionally, and that just generates a better, more diverse outcome, I would say.
It does, and it's about putting people in. It's about putting humans in front of humans. Like, just as simple as that. Just bring the people together and let them figure out if it's going to work. I'll give you a very precise example. About 6 months ago or so, we had an event at SmartRecruiters around people that were coming out of prison, that had done jail time and were re-entering the workforce. And I volunteer in one of the prisons here in California. I've been part of this organization that helps with second chances, whatever. We organized an event, and we had about 40 or so formerly incarcerated individuals in the room. We brought in a couple recruiters, and we're like chatting, right? And one of the questions was like, what are some of the skills you guys picked up that you think are applicable in the real world, right? And then this guy stands up and he says, well, I think so. He introduces himself, has done 25 years, just got released 3 months ago, right? And he says, well, I think I'd be a good in customer support, for example, because, if there is tension in the room, well, I guess I know how to handle tension in the room, right? It doesn't scare me too much. And then I'm really have a lot of resilience, because I guess you don't spend 25 years in a box without, being somewhat resilient. And then he goes on and on. And I'm sitting, listening, or I'm actually standing, listening at this guy. And Kevin, my head of support, is next to me. And I'm like, Kevin, go for it, right? And so it was like we had a great candidate in front of us. There is zero chance that this person with his resume would make it through our screening. You just never even apply, right? So you just got to bring people together and actually connect and think about, is this person going to be a good customer support person? Turns out, yeah, absolutely.
You know what, Jerome, that's actually a great idea, because we've over-automatized the recruitment process, over-digitized it, if you like, in the sense that all we're trying to do is basically create these efficiencies in work, which means we're removing as much humanity as possible, because when you put humanity in there, it's actually expensive in terms of time. And if you work purely on profit maximization, it kind of looks like, oh, it makes no sense for you to do this. However, it could be what you do is that most of the time you optimize for time, but occasionally you throw in a random kind of black swan. You engineer it so that you put people into a room like you did with this this event, and then you see what might happen. And you might just get these unscheduled encounters that can really cut the Gordian knot of what you're trying to solve in the first place. So yeah, I know that you do a lot of work with the formerly incarcerated. Actually, it's one of the most remarkable kind of experiences that I had when I was in San Francisco last year, was to meet some of those former inmates and to hear their stories. And it suddenly occurred to me, like, oh, actually, we do have a serious responsibility here. I remember back in my old recruitment agency days, I did remove people because they couldn't explain their gap in their CV. It was because they were incarcerated, and actually not for a long time, but it was a 9-month gap. And I said, okay, I'm not presenting that person. I'm not presenting that person into the short list. So I've prevented that person from having an economic opportunity. So yeah, absolutely.
I think Hung, you touch on a good point here, which is a mindset. As recruiters, we've been conditioned to filter for risk. Ooh, there is a hole in the experience. What did you really do during 6 months? You were traveling around the world. That sounds weird, right? We've been actually conditioned to filter on risk. How about we filter on opportunity? What do I actually think you can achieve? And if you just change your mindset, and instead of looking for risk, you look for the opportunity, is this person actually going to kick ass at the job? Your mind frame and your performance as a recruiter changes.
How would you, there is a scenario though, when you've got a hiring manager that insists on looking at CVs.
Of course.
So, I can imagine a scenario. Let's say we have this person formerly incarcerated, there's gaps in the CV. I've met them. I think they're amazing. I go and have the conversation with the hiring manager, and he or she comes back at me to say, I need to have X amount of experience, this, and this. Like, what would your advice be to me in that scenario? Like, how do I handle that particular case?
Yeah. So there's really two things here. In some cases, people need to be retrained, reskilled. And that's a conscious investment decision that you make, which comes on top of a hiring decision. So when we hire that person as a support agent, said we understand it's going to take you 6 months at least to actually be able to do the job. And we have zero expectation of you performing during those 6 months. We're going to invest a lot. And at the end, you better be good, otherwise you're fired. Right? So like we invest in you to bring you to where we think, because we think you have potential. That's actually an investment decision that a hiring manager isn't going to make. That's more of a program. It's more of a company thing. This I think is best organized at the corporate level. But if you have a candidate that you ultimately believe can do the job, is going to perform, but doesn't have the right background, then fight for it, right? So just stand your ground. And I think the relationship here between hiring managers and recruiters needs to or can be repaired in a way that recruiters are true talent partners, true advisors to hiring managers. The problem is, what does a recruiter do today? They do a full stack everything. Email, sourcing, rejection, logistics, coordination. So this is the job where you go to be overwhelmed, right? If you start to be better organized, and especially in corporate environment, to have a better separation of roles, where the marketeers are marketeers, the sourcers are sourcers, the coordinators are coordinators, and the recruiters are advisors to the manager, and they actually make it happen, then you can really upskill your recruiters, and recruiters then becomes, the manager goes, wow, Hong, what do you think? Right? Like you need to asked, you need to receive this from your manager. If your manager doesn't ask, what do you think? Then they basically don't care. So you're just processing resume. And so I'd suggest move on to another company where they value recruiting more.
And you know what, Jerome, when you're talking about having to move up the value chain in that way, it's actually very important for the recruiter's own career. When you take a look at workforce automation and technology, that's going to interrupt a lot of the logistical work that recruiters will be doing. If we're not positioning ourselves at least at the equal of hiring managers, we're not going to be very safe from being disintermediated ourselves. So we kind of have like a selfish motive to get there, because if we're hanging around sort of just processing, we're going to be outcompeted by a machine. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I think the automation and the increased tech is an amazing opportunity to up-level the function. Look at what happened to marketing. Marketing went through a whole lot of automation in the last decade. Do you count less marketeers now than before? Actually, I count more, right? And marketing is now way more powerful than it ever was. Before, you had salespeople, they were selling, they're the king, and then marketing, you guys show some events, right? Now, actually, what your marketing delivers is what drives the salespeople you can hire. They actually are upstream. They drive your sales strategy, and salespeople are becoming anecdotal, right? So exactly that is happening in recruiting. And if you embrace new technology, and if you start to think about how do I market to candidates, how do I professionalize my TA organization, we could have a whole session about how to do that, but actually it is an amazing opportunity to up-level the function and all the members of the function as well.
So I've been trying not to get involved in this conversation too much here, because you're starting to get onto where I wanted to take it, and I didn't want to take it there too early, because the theme's been about what you've been talking about. You just talked about sales and about marketing and the comparison perhaps with talent acquisition. what do you see any difference between a sales and marketing function and talent acquisition, or no difference at all?
No, there are obviously differences, but ultimately you're selling a product, which is a job at your company, and you have a target market, which is the talent market around you. You segment your market to apply marketing strategies to generate potential customers, which are potential candidates that have varying degrees of interest, and you move them through a process or a funnel to get them interested until you actually can pick which customer you're going to sell to, which is the candidate you're going to hire. So there's a lot of parallels. There's obviously some differences as well, but there's a lot of parallel and a lot to learn from one another.
So I'm not sure there's any differences. I mean, you've just described something that sounds identical, but you did start it by saying, obviously there are a lot of differences. I don't think there's any differences at all. What I think we sometimes say, well, recruitment sales. Well, that's wrong. Sometimes we say, well, recruitment's marketing. Well, that's also wrong.
Yeah,
but when you say recruitment, sales, and marketing, I think that's right. I don't think there's any difference in terms of the disciplines involved.
I think where there is a difference is the buying decision is different. In the sense, I think job decisions are actually more important. There's very few things in life that you'd actually buy that is more important than you actually changing a job.
Different than buying a house. Different than buying somewhere to live.
But you do that very episodically, almost at the same rate, at the same cadence as you would do to change your jobs. So it's that every 3-4 year type of activity. But most sales and marketing is driven, let's say at the consumer level, you're buying things very, very often every day. So I think there probably is a difference in the sense that for a candidate, especially let's say a highly skilled in demand candidate, for them to do a switch midstream, that may be a super significant thing to do. So actually recruiters have to have more care and more sophistication in having that conversation than if you were, just shipping a pair of jeans or something like that.
Yeah, so it's different between choosing between Coke and Lilt, but is it different between choosing which house to buy or which car to buy or which dating site to join or which insurance products to buy? It's pretty similar to those.
Well, I mean, there's probably a table that we could create and map across in terms of the level of significance, right? But I think for me, job discovery, at least when you're looking at permanent work, maybe with gig economy and more alternative forms of work, we're actually going to reduce our commitment. Candidates might reduce their commitment, and companies might also. Yeah, companies might do also. In fact, I need to ask you that, Jerome. This is a slight segue from it, but I think one of the big challenges of the existing vendors within the ATS CRM space is how do you handle the alternative workforce? Because no question that the system was built with the default in mind that the person that you're going to be processing in this system will be full-time, permanent on-site.
Yes and no. I think the systems are designed to attract and select great talents. The contract type that results from this is kind of fluctuating. It fluctuates by situation, by countries, I think the real question comes down to if I'm hiring a contractor, do I actually need to apply a recruiting process? Do I actually need to be looking for the best possible contractor? Do I need to interview with the same rigor? And often we say, no, it doesn't matter. I just get the person. It doesn't work. I'll ask for another one. Well, I think that's wrong. So the real question is, do you actually apply recruiting discipline to the contingent workforce? And I think we should, because our contingent workforces are increasingly a part of our overall talent.
Can I ask a couple of questions about recruitment technology? So do you believe there's a future for standalone applicant tracking systems or standalone CRMs?
Most definitely so. I mean, the people who, it's actually interesting because the market is just bifurcating. It's really nice. And I say this sometimes to customers. I said, if you believe that recruiting is an admin function, a workflow that needs to be completed, then of course you put it in your HRIS because it just sits there with performance reviews and some other processes that are informed. If you think it is a sales and marketing function and you want to compete for the best talent, then of course you have a sales and marketing like talent acquisition suite that speaks to your HRIS. But it's a bit like you'd say, oh, well, the invoice is going to be issued in my finance system. Therefore, I'm going to use my finance system as a sales and marketing system. Duh, no, right? So it's really fundamentally what you believe in. I think companies are going from ATS to HR suite are just on the continuum of bad, right? It's about tracking applicants. And those who are like, oh, hold on a second, I want to compete for the best talent. Jobs are increasingly more skilled, they're more global, tenure is going down, and we have a labor shortage, and I want to compete for talent. Those people invest in a sales and marketing function. And I remember vividly talking to the CHRO of a very large German company with 400,000 employees. We just signed them as a customer. This is like 3 years ago. Just signed them as a customer, global project, every country. And I said, so why are you going with us? Like, why not SAP? Because they have SAP everywhere. And this person looked at me and said, Jerome, it's very simple. We have decided to make recruiting a competitive advantage worldwide. Plain and simple, right? So, if you have 400,000 employee, manufacturing, technology, powerhouse, your future is your ability to hire the best engineers and the best people around the world. That's your future. We have decided to make recruiting a competitive advantage worldwide. Great. Okay, well, then get the right platform for it.
So you answered the question. I understand why you answered the question the way you did, and I agree with what you just said. It's not quite what I meant by the question. So what I meant by the question was, you first of all built an applicant tracking system. Second time round, you've built a talent acquisition suite. So you've built a product which is an ATS and a CRM. So my question is, do you believe there's a future in separate applicant tracking systems and CRMs, one sitting on top of the other?
Can I give you an answer you're not going to like, Adam, or?
No, I may or may not like the answer.
I think ultimately it's the same candidate. It's hard.
Of course it is.
Right? It's the same candidate, and it's the same candidate, and it's really hard to say, all right, so I went to your meetup, so I'm in the CRM. Now I think I might be interested in a job. Now I'm in the ATS. Well, actually, this is not the right job. Okay, now I go back to your CRM. Like, this is the same person, and you need a unique candidate profile, if only for GDPR and other reasons, a unique candidate profile where all of your touch points with that person are in the same place. So I think those two markets are going to merge, is how I see it. So I think that ultimately there is no ATS CRM. CRM was born because the ATS sucked at it, right? Yeah. And I think those two are going to merge.
Yeah, I don't know why they were ever separate systems. It doesn't make any sense.
I think they're building towards each other, aren't they? I mean, the CRM companies have to build towards ATS. ATS companies are building towards CRM. They're meeting in the middle already. Let's see what happens. I mean, I think that ultimately there's still mileage in having some separation simply because the activities generally are different. If you're doing, for instance, more marketing type, if you do marketing type stuff, basically you'll optimize for larger scale and you'll optimize for more touch points and less pipelining. ATS is ultimately a pipeline. And I struggle with sales type tools, like CRM tools also have this problem. While Salesforce, for instance, often have like third-party software doing the plugin on CRM side because it's still a pipeline manager at the end of the day. But anyway, we can talk on that for another time because we are running close to time. One more question, Adam, before we let Jerome get on with his day.
And I still have my toes that I haven't touched.
Oh, no. Sorry. Right. So listen, I've got one more really important question. Can you build a recruitment tech business to go from nothing to 1,000 enterprise companies in 5 years from Europe?
I think where I'm sitting today is an answer, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to fund enterprise software businesses out of Europe. Simply because market size are different, and therefore VC checks are different. I mean, we've raised $100 million to build SmartRecruiters. That's a lot of money, and that is because our investors expect that we're going to build a massive company. And I think if you sit in France or in the UK or in Portugal, it's like, yeah, you become the leader in France, and then you can invade Belgium, right? The scale are just different.
Okay, good answer. Understood.
That's a good answer. And you know what? That might just be the nature of the game, because Europe has its countries, I mean, and we've seen obviously at the political level, there's a very strong commitment, of course, to this national identity, and all of those things speak to market size. So, maybe.
And Hung, I was going to say, and ultimately, I am in San Francisco. We have more employees in Europe than we do in the US. So does it matter?
That's right. Yeah, multiple people. I've been to the Polish office in Krakow and also in Berlin, of course. So absolutely. So, okay, great stuff. Well, listen, Jerome, fantastic having you on the show. Really good to hear. Really good to hear your story again, and to hear your thoughts on where the recruitment tech scene is going to go, but also most importantly, what the sort of responsibility that recruiters have in the world of work at large. Actually, before I let you go, we haven't even talked about reverse recruiting. We need to talk about that really quickly. Can you just explain, like in 60 seconds, what this is?
Absolutely. Reverse recruiting is a global movement where we encourage recruiters and hiring managers, if they want, to take time off out of their day, maybe an afternoon per quarter, and invite to their offices overlooked talent, people they have rejected, people who have a hard time accessing the job market, and give back to them. So on Reverse Recruiting Day, recruiters work for the candidate, not for the company. We had a large-scale one in Amsterdam. You were there. We had 400 candidates that walked into the door, watching these refugees and formerly incarcerated people and all those people that actually have a really hard time finding a job. Sitting with a head of recruiting at a big company for the first time was beautiful. And we do it internally. We have a lot of customers who have taken the pledge. A lot of companies have taken the pledge to do it. We'll do the next one at Hiring Success in San Francisco on Feb 11 and 12. And I would encourage you to actually join that. It's easy. Just pick a candidate who has a hard time and go grab a beer with them. And that's already your reverse recruiting with one person, and then scale from there. But try to give back.
That's fantastic, Jerome. Reverse recruiting, I think that's an initiative every business should sign up and get involved in. It will make a huge impact. Simply to do a half a day, even half a day a year will suffice. That will be a significant step forward. So thank you very much, Jerome. What a pleasure it is to speak to you. I will be in San Francisco, so I'll book my flight after this call, and I'll be there in a couple of weeks. I look forward to seeing you then. Good luck on everything you're doing, and here's to your hiring success, man.
Cheers. Thank you for having me, Hung. Thank you, Adam.
What a great he's always so motivated, Jerome. His motivation is through the roof. Is amazing.
I've got to say, as somebody who founded a recruitment tech business a few years ago, I think there's two companies that anybody that wants to build a recruitment tech company, you want to study two companies intensively. One of them for everything it does, and one of them for its marketing. The one for its marketing is Smashfly. The one for everything it does is SmartRecruiters.
Yeah, that's a huge endorsement, and I would totally concur with that. It's very hard to once but twice successfully build this type of product, but I think a lot of it is down to the values that comes from the CEO, and that's very clear with Jerome. So anyway, that's it for the show. Thank you everyone else for watching. It's been a pleasure having you. We are going to be back next week. We're going to be talking about how to message software engineers next week, so that's going to be super interesting. Adam, I'm going to stand you down for that because we've got an upgrade. Erin Matthew is coming in to help me do that show, and we're actually going to be interviewing software developers on screen and asking them what it is that they want to hear from us recruiters, rather than all of the canned messages that we usually get. So thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you tune in to next week's show. Final word to our sponsors, which of course is SmartRecruiters. Check out Hiring Success. It's a fantastic event. I'll also circulate the reverse recruiting link. That's something I think anybody can endorse and support. And we'll be back with you next week.
Cool. Bye.
Yeah, Shelley, I got it. I'll see you there. I'll see you and Jeremiah there.